Well, a very pleasant good evening. Time for Startup Talk from Indian River State College with Mr. Tom Kindred.
Thank you, sir. And it is time for Startup Talk again, and welcome to another segment and installment. The show is designed to assist and help Treasure and Research Coast residents who want to start, grow, or accelerate their business. As I always say, what a great place it is to own and operate a business along the beautiful Research and Treasure Coast. We will spend time during our hour together this evening to highlight and create awareness regarding the very powerful and robust business assistance programs that exist right here in our community at our very own Indian River State College. I am Tom Kindred, and I serve as the Regional Director for the Small Business Development Center here at Indian River State College. Underwriters for this segment of Startup Talk are the law firm of Dean, Mead, Minton Zwimer, celebrating 30 years of service on the Treasure Coast, on the web at deanmead.com, and our friends at Express Printing of Port St. Lucie. So, Greg, how are you this evening?
Doing well.
That's good. How are things going in the world of IRSC sports?
IRSC's doing quite well. Yep. We're going to be heading to the state tournament.
Nice.
Yep.
Any home games left that we can promote and go to?
Yep. Sophomore night is Tuesday night, and that's against Broward. So yeah, that'll be a big one.
How tough is Broward? Tough.
They're tough.
They're tough.
Yeah, but they pretty much got knocked out by Palm Beach. So
okay. Well, that may be a good game.
So, yeah.
Tuesday evening at 5:30.
Yeah. Well, the ladies are at 5, and then the guys are at 7.
All right. It's interesting as I kind of go through that, intro. I always say, what a great place it is to own and operate a business along the Research and Treasure Coast. And it is a great place. And, I think one of the reasons that it is a good place is because, we've got a lot of resources in this community. And as you kind of stop and you think about folks that we can turn to in our community and the business acumen that exists around our community, it is a great place to own and operate a business. And tonight we've got one of those standout organizations, professional organizations that support the business community and just do it in so many ways. We've got a couple of folks with us tonight, a couple of attorneys with us tonight from the law firm of Dean, Mead, Minton, Zwimer. We've got Dana Applebaum. Welcome to the show, Dana.
Thank you for having me.
And we've got, again, our good friend who's been with us a couple of times. We've got Michael Minton. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Good evening, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, we today part of one of the things that the SBDC tries to do is kind of bring workshops, seminars, trainings to the area that are relevant and value added for our business community. And today on main campus, we partnered up with the law firm of Dean, Mead, Minton Zwimer and did a little tax reform workshop. We kind of had a nice crowd in the room today of local business owners and operators, accountants, bankers, some other law firms were there, and we talked about all that was going on with tax reform and the tax cuts in the new Jobs Act. So again, impressive.
Has there been tax reform?
There has. I
haven't heard anything about that.
Well, then you're going to hear it tonight. Prepare yourself. Put the kids to bed, put the dog down, let the dog out. It's it. We are going to talk tax reform tonight. I was part of the participated in the workshop today, and so again, a lot going on, a lot to talk about, especially from a business perspective. So I want to jump right into it and let's talk about tax reform. Let's kind of cover the high points for the business folks that I do get a lot of folks as I travel around. I'll run into some folks out there in the community, and they'll say, Tom, hear you on Thursday night. So this will be a good show for those that own and operate a business to kind of tune into, because there was a lot that was presented today in the workshop. But let's start real quick. Let's just kind of cover who we've got on the panel with us tonight. Dana, just give us a little bit of your background, your pathway to tax law, and your pathway to Dean Mead, and your pathway here to the Treasure Coast.
Sure. I spent about 8 glorious years up in Gainesville at the University of Florida, at the conclusion of which I was in the master's program up there to get my master's in the law of taxation. And I had a particularly wonderful mentor up there who I worked with as a graduate assistant, who kind of did some matchmaking for me and the firm. And before I actually entered that program, he set up a nice lunch with Michael and Misty, and they were up in Gainesville probably for a football weekend, and we went out to lunch and chatted and decided that I would come over down to Fort Pierce for the summer for a few weeks after taking the bar and see what things were like here at Dean Mead, and I liked it so much that I came right back after my LLM, and I've been here ever since. Nice. So that's been almost a decade now. Wow. That I've been down here in Fort Pierce.
When did you graduate from law school? At 14?
Yes, I'm a legal Doogie Howser. No, the normal age, but a lady doesn't say her true age.
That's right.
So I'll stick to the abstract. So it's flown by, and wow. I've been down here ever since, practicing in the beautiful Treasure Coast. And recently I had the distinction of becoming the firm's newest shareholder, so very excited about that.
Congratulations.
And the rest is history, so they say.
I can tell you, you've always done a great job when you come on the show with us. It's you always bring great information and enlighten us, and you did a great job today.
Well, thank you.
During
so
your
if Mike was up there on a football weekend, that's when they had a football team, I guess.
I knew
they still play football up there.
I knew.
I'm sorry.
We're coming off back-to-back championships around that.
They were good years.
Yeah.
I knew that was coming.
And we were able to get the cream of the crop to come join us here in Fort Pierce with our firm when Dana came. It's interesting, Tom, when she mentions the fact of who introduced us. It's a Professor Dennis Calfee, who was one of my professors when I was in the LLM program at Florida, and he was a brand new professor. He'd been maybe there for a year or two before I took the course 30
now he's been there
years ago.
Yeah.
So
long time.
Neat.
But who's counting?
That's a
right.
great story.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
Nice. So again, Michael, needs no introduction around the Treasure Coast, and probably needs no introduction around the majority of the state of Florida. Michael, all the work you do and the work you've done, and I don't want to age you, but you have been doing this for a long time. And
thanks, Tom. Yes, I've seen more than my share of monumental tax acts. And one of the great things, though, about today's presentation, thank you again for hosting it. You may not have been aware, but you drew an audience as far away as from Gainesville and Tampa today in the different businesses that were represented in our
it was a great
attendees.
Great crowd.
So you did a great job. Great for SBDC and for IRSC to host that for us. But it was a great thrill for me to be able to introduce one of my mentors and one of the founding fathers of our firm, Charlie Edgerton, who came and spoke at our presentation today as well. Charlie was like I say, one of the founders of our firm. He's the gentleman that hired me. He was a mentor in my early development as a tax attorney, and has been so supportive of us when we came down here and opened the office on the Treasure Coast in 1987. It's been over 30 years now. So time flies when you're having fun.
It is.
And also Brad Gould, who's another one of our shareholders. Brad has been practicing with me for almost 2 decades, so we pretty much lined them all up there. We had every decade covered today in the presentation. And Brad's just an extraordinary, gifted tax attorney that gives great advice for small family businesses and for our estate planning clients. And it's just been a great addition. When I was president of the firm, I really needed a right hand like Brad to be able to keep all the balls in the air and not drop them, and we did a great job with it, and he was certainly a significant part of that teamwork.
I remember that night we were all together, and you talked about how they discovered Fort Pierce. I think it was Charlie that actually spoke the night that you had your celebration.
Correct.
And I kind of
liked what Charlie said, that opening an office on the Treasure Coast was not on the radar, but looking back over the decision to do that, they're very, very pleased with.
When I joined Dean Mead, the firm had just been formed. It was formed in 1980, and I was one of the first large groups of associates they hired in '82. And our firm was a spinoff of another large business law firm. And one of the first things they decided, because they used to be a branch office of another firm, was we will never have any branches. So it took me a few years to overcome that threshold. But once they saw the opportunity here and were able to embrace the warmth of this community and how hospitable the others, the tax accountants and the business people and the insurance agents and all the people who are so important to refer work to us, it really was a very easy sell after they got that chance to experience it.
And you're right. Today, as I looked around that room today, it really was it was a who's who of
absolutely
bankers and accounting firms.
Supreme Court Justice Jim Alderman, who was one of my mentors as a young man before I went to law school. Judge Alderman and my father were dear friends, and he actually did a lot of work for our family back before he went on the bench, and was someone that I always looked up to and was very instrumental in us coming back to the Treasure Coast.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's right. We're going to have him on the show one night. I got to get Judge Alderman on the show.
If you'll get him here, you're going to get You'll also get a first-hand rendition of a true story about the old cattle drives across the state of Florida.
Very
cool. If you're familiar with the novel A Land Remembered by Patrick Smith, you'll hear many passages from Judge Alderman that come right out of A Land Remembered, and he was there.
Right.
He saw it. He experienced it.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Let's start kind of again. You're a business law firm, and I've always said, what I really enjoy about discussing business and talking business with you, Michael, and Dana and Brad and the other folks on your team at Dean Mead is that you guys really, it's not just attorney talk. I mean, you guys can talk business too, and that's one thing I've always liked is you guys really can make that transition, from the legal issues into the business world. You understand business. You've got great business acumen yourself, and you've been involved in businesses. You certainly, Michael, have been involved in family businesses. So you guys get what we do in business. You don't just see it from the legal side. So that's what I've always enjoyed about discussing issues with you and the attorneys at Dean Mead. But let's go back just one step, and let's kind of talk about that just for a second. Most attorneys do specialize. I mean, there are specialties in the legal business, and your firm is a business firm. I mean, what are some types of issues that your firm kind of handles? You and kind of talk to us about what you don't do too, so that we kind of do get what law firms do. There are specialties in these law firms.
There are, Tom, and let me sort of take a step back to a term you've used multiple times in this discussion. Value added. Right. That's something that we use quite a bit in our firm. We want to be known as trusted advisors that bring value to our clients, and if we do that, then they've made an investment with us, and it's hopefully an investment that'll yield positive returns for them with the value added advice. We are a business law firm, and it starts from doing work for the families that we do estate planning for, and most of those families have family businesses, so we help them with their business structuring and choice of entity. And then as the families evolve from one generation to the next, you have succession planning as to how you transfer that business from one generation to the next. Each of those businesses are going to have issues having to deal with contracts and leases and buying property or doing like-kind exchanges, conservation easements, a variety of issues that come up. Those are all areas that we handle, And then ultimately there may be a desire to merge with another business. So there's the mergers and acquisitions aspects of it. And then ultimately at some point in time, the patriarch or matriarch are going to pass. We have helped them with the administration of the estate and make sure that the assets follow in the form that they wished in their estate planning documents with the least administrative cost and to reduce any exposure to taxes. So that's sort of in a microcosm, how we represent our family businesses, and then that segues into all sorts of professionals. And Dana does an awful lot of work with different professionals like doctors and things. Maybe you want to expand on that.
Sure. Historically, like Michael said, we have done a lot of work with family businesses, but we also do a lot of work recently and over the years setting up new businesses and working with professionals and other types of businesses that are just getting started. We'll really start them from the beginning and sit down and talk with them about what kind of an entity and what kind of setup and overall structure is right for them. Get them set up, get them going, get the right paperwork in place for them, and assist them in all manner of things from employee handbooks, decisions about how best to structure their business tax-wise, maybe employee leasing, equipment leasing, that sort of thing, just to name a few. But once they're off and running, they'll come back to us as things come up. And at that point, it's a lot of the same issues that Michael was mentioning for the ongoing family businesses of things change and things evolve, and we're there to assist them as they grow and evolve. Same is true with professionals, with doctors and other kinds of professionals. There are some different types of considerations. Doctors particularly are a risky crowd, I'll call them, and they have some specific considerations because they are open to certain liabilities in their field, and so we'll help them as they set up their estate plan to minimize those liabilities and suggest the right types of investments and vehicles for them to do the most that they can to protect themselves and their families as they go forward and do their business and do what they do and protect their home and their livelihood as well.
So go ahead.
And then, there are going to be situations where not everything works as everybody anticipates.
Yes.
And so
that does happen.
No, really?
There'll be times when our commercial litigators need to be involved to help resolve disputes or help navigate through things to avoid ending up in a dispute. And then ultimately, we also have people who deal with creditors' rights issues and bankruptcy and things of that nature when we have a downturn in the economy. And as we've all experienced, there are times when very well-intended people can get caught in the trap and have to deal with it. And there are mechanisms there that allow us to deal with that.
So again, bottom line is you guys really are focused on business. Then there's law firms that are focused on criminal law, so to speak. So you are Dean Mead, Minton Zwimer is a business law firm.
That's correct. And we also don't do domestic relation issues, but we will do tax advice when there is like a divorce or some type of property settlement where they need some tax advice to help structure things or set up trusts or deal with retirement plans or things of that nature.
Right, that comes up often. And we do handle some prenuptial agreements as well, particularly in relation to family businesses. You know, the whole family wants to make sure that, their legacy is protected, and bringing someone new in, obviously.
Well, I never thought of that. Yeah, that would change the family business.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yep.
But we also don't do personal injury. Those are the big three of what we don't do: personal injury, those domestic type issues, and criminal.
Right. Okay. I always bring this up anytime we have attorneys on the show and we talk about it. But, we do teach. There's a concept. It's a test question, actually, on one of the tests I used to give. But for entrepreneurs, no, that required an answer. What two professionals does every entrepreneur or small business owner, need to engage? And basically we teach that you've got to have an accountant and you've got to have an attorney. Well, those are the two you got to have.
As you heard at our presentation earlier today with the new Tax Act, we're thinking about printing up some T-shirts about "Have you hugged your tax lawyer recently?" Because one of the things about the new Tax Act that I shared today is that it is full of all sorts of treasures. It's like a formulaic treasure map. Right. And those that know how to navigate it are going to come out with very good results. Those that don't are going to end up with some unhappy people and some unexpected consequences. And so both of those professions, your tax accountant and your tax attorney, I think are going to see a resurgence of people wanting their advice to avoid the traps and find the treasure.
Well, that leads me, great segue into my next big question for the show here. The new tax code and laws. Again, I had the opportunity to sit through the workshop today that you guys led, and it was, of course, kind of put on and facilitated by the Florida Small Business Development Center. And again, your partner, Charlie Edgerton, he made the comment about the reform, putting tax attorneys out of work. And I guess, it was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I guess, at some level, the government and legislators and their objective in tax reform is to make things simpler, but that's not always the way it works, is it? I mean,
as a tax lawyer, and I'm sure our accountants feel the same way, whenever you hear simplification included in any title, it really sort of makes you salivate, because it's going to be anything but simplified, and there's going to be a lot of complexity with it. And what Charlie was referring to is when the Tax Act of 1986 came out, it really was revolutionary and had a number of changes that did affect our practice for quite a number of years. But then over time, with the various special interests and the lobbyists and all that are involved with what happens in making the sausage in Washington, D.C., a number of those tax incentives and opportunities came back into the code. And so, for the last 15, 20 years, much of what was taken out in the 86 Tax Act worked its way back in. There was some thought that we were going to have that type of revolutionary change with this Tax Act, but I think those of us that are now going through it realize that it's increased the complexity rather than decreased the complexity. Wouldn't you think, Dana?
I would agree with that.
And I think that was kind of to his point, was that there may have been the objective of making things simpler, but it never kind of works out that way. I mean, it always. So my
little postcard is not going to work.
Well,
that's what they kept saying.
There may be a postcard, but I'm not sure how any of our clients are going to be able to utilize just a postcard. But there might be an opportunity just to make the 1040 EZ, where you just send them whatever you can. So.
Yeah, right. And it's got a Leavenworth post box. Yes.
So I guess let's kind of start the conversation maybe with Dana. She presented today on really your section was really about how it affects individuals, and so kind of talk about the changes primarily affecting the individual taxpayers. Kind of give us the high points, Dana, a little bit.
Sure. The high points for individual taxpayers, starting from the really 30,000-foot view, is that you've overall seen a reduction in the rates. So the top rate previously was 39.6%. You ran from 10% up to that 39.6%. And now the top rate that you're going to have is a 37% rate. You've seen a similar decrease over most of the brackets, and 15, 25, 28, 33% brackets have also similarly decreased by a couple percentage points each. There are also higher thresholds before you meet those higher tax brackets. So overall, it's saying that it is a tax decrease. Now, the other side of that coin is that there are a number of deductions that have been done away with. And so probably the bulk of the discussion and what needs to be understood and really explained is what deductions have been suspended or have gone away or scaled back, and what changes to some very specific forms of different taxes that are also kind of running alongside the regular income tax. That's where the real discussion is. The 30,000-foot view is relatively simple in that it's lower. But that's not the overall tax picture, and it requires somebody to go in and really do the math to determine how it affects you, because it's going to be different for every person, really.
But Tom, as you heard, the big winner of the Tax Act are multinational corporations.
Right.
That was the message today, is that the Tax Act is supposed to create something like $1.6 trillion of additional deficit, and of that, something like 1.5 trillion of that deficit is from the lost revenues from multinational C corporations who had their tax rate cut to a flat tax of 21%, which sort of is interesting. It's a tax cut, except for very small C corporations who used to pay 15%, and now they're going to pay 21% flat tax as well. But the big multinationals really came out very, very well. And everything else we're going to be looking at deals with, family businesses and pass-through businesses and other types of things that we work with. But the big ticket item here was the change of the corporate rate, which needed to happen, frankly.
Well,
we were out of step with the rest of the world.
Well, I'm jumping. I may jump ahead here a little bit because I was going to get to that. But again, your partner really was, talked about how it really did need to change in this country, and how we were a little out of step with the rest of the world. Talk a little bit about his words and his conversation about that.
Well, your marginal tax rate, we had one of the highest marginal tax rates for corporate entities of any civilized country, and we were losing the multinational corporations to be formed and operated out of other countries because it was just a much more welcoming environment. So dropping the rate down to 21% really puts us in a much better position to deal with the other parts of the world where corporations were accumulating for their corporate headquarters to be operated from. And puts the United States back in as because you think about it, we're the largest economy in the world, and we have the safest, even in everything that's been going on in the world, still the safest place to be. So why wouldn't you want to have your corporate headquarters located here? And one of the things that was pushing corporations away was the tax rate.
Right. And I think you even mentioned in your presentation, Michael, that while there was a lot of moving parts in this thing, and it is kind of a treasure map you got to dig in. But I liked what you said too, that attorneys like yourself, tax attorneys, you're working for the business attorneys. I mean, you're looking for what you referred to as kind of workarounds, which I thought was a great term. I mean, you're fighting every day to do the best job you can do for clients.
Exactly. And one of the things that affects our practice is one of the code changes that affects the taxation of government grants to entities that do public works projects, basically public-private partnerships. In the past, when a corporation received a contribution to the capital from a governmental entity to go do a certain capital improvement that affected the public as a whole. In our area, it's water restoration projects, environmental restoration and water projects. Those contributions to capital were tax-free to the entity that received it because you wanted them to be able to take the full amount and make the capital improvement. You don't want to penalize them and have them pay tax on it so they couldn't go do the improvement, or else they'd have to gross up the cost of the improvement to 130% to be able to cover the tax to net out what they need. Right. So there's a direct correlation there. The tax code changes that for corporations, and that's one of the deductions, one of the exemptions that was eliminated. So now when a corporation receives a contribution to capital for capital improvement, right, it's going to be taxable income to it. So part of what we're doing is, one, trying to address that change in the code section because there's a grandfather clause and other things we're working on, but also there may be ways of structuring things differently that avoids the taxable activity altogether, and that's part of what we say are workarounds. We're busy working at other ways to structure transactions that yield a better results for our clients.
So this affects every corporation that would have a grant situation with federal or state government then, right?
We refer to it as an assault on public-private partnerships, which was an unintended consequence, we believe, of the change. We've actually met with some folks at the state agencies, and we said, look, what we're here to meet with you on is the tip of the iceberg. It's just the things that we work on, but we've got to think this is going to affect you in a much larger way. And they said, absolutely, because the old adage about an iceberg, you only see about 10% of it, the rest of it's under the water. And they see how much of that iceberg they've got to deal with. So we're working on that, and there may be some legislative opportunities. But those are the kind of things where we've tried to get out of ahead of issues before people get surprised with a tax bill they didn't expect.
Great conversation this evening with Michael and Dana from the law firm of Dean, Mead, Minton, and Zwimer. This is Startup Talk. We're going to take just a couple of minutes break here to recognize our underwriters for this evening's show.
Startup Talk is being underwritten by the law firm of Dean, Mead, Minton, and Zwimer, celebrating 31 years of service on the Treasure Coast. Practice areas include commercial litigation, tax and business law, real estate development, agricultural and water law, trust, probate, and estate planning. On the web at deanmead.com and by the folks at Express Printing of Port St. Lucie. All right.
If you're just joining us, this is Startup Talk from Indian River State College's Dan K. Richardson Entrepreneurship Development Institute. I am Tom Kindred, Regional Director for the Florida Small Business Development Center here at Indian River State College. Great, robust, powerful business assistance program. And today we had we partnered with and facilitated a presentation by the law firm of Dean, Mead, Minton, and Zwimer to introduce information and present information about tax reform and the Jobs Act. Had a great crowd today on the main campus there in the Kite Center for the presentation. So it was a great opportunity to learn what was going on from the people who know best, tax attorneys from Dean Mead. So we've got with us this evening Dana from a tax attorney with the law firm of Dean, Mead, Minton, and Zwimer, and we've got Michael Minton, local legend in the field of tax law. And of course in the field of turkey hunting too. So
don't go.
I'm not dead yet, Tom. Don't you have to be dead to be a legend?
Well, I don't know.
Could be a living legend.
It could be a living legend.
That's right.
Say living legend.
And now you can't say overnight success because you've been in business 31 years.
That's right, 30. Well, and been around longer than 31 years.
That was really the tipping point, 30 to 31 years.
I want to circle back real quick to Dana. Your part of the presentation today kind of focused on individual issues that might change because of the tax reform. Talk to us a little bit about what happened. You know, everybody's familiar with home mortgage deductions. What kind of happened in all of this in this update to home mortgages? Anything dramatic there?
Yes and no. So home mortgage deductions, to kind of show you where we've been to where we are, the way that it worked previously was that there were two kinds of home mortgage interest deductions. And you had acquisition indebtedness, which is generally something secured by the home that you then use the money to buy, build, or better the house. And then equity indebtedness, which again is secured by the home, but you're using it for something else. And between those two types, there were limits on the amount of debt that you could deduct on. It used to be $1 million for the acquisition indebtedness, and I believe $250,000 for the equity indebtedness. And now that has changed. What has changed is on acquisition indebtedness, you are only allowed to deduct on $750,000 of the debt, and equity indebtedness is just gone. You can't. There is an exception where you can get in under the old limit for the acquisition indebtedness if you incurred the debt prior to December 15th of last year. So there is some
back to the grandfathering.
Right, back to the grandfathering idea where if you've already got something going, they're not going to penalize you, but going forward you are going to be subject to slightly reduced limits. And this is where I was going with, the tax code giveth and the tax code taketh away. This is part of the taketh away, where they're decreasing what's available to you.
Talk about the the deduction for your children. Was there a change in that? I think there was. You spoke to some sort of the kiddie tax issue. Was that one of the highlights in the change?
Sure. I think you're thinking of two different things. The kiddie tax is a separate regime where a tax is imposed on the what's called unearned income of children. It used to be that there was an incentive for parents to kind of push their assets over to their kids who, wouldn't have the same tax issues that they did. Say if they were taxed in the highest bracket, they might push some.
Sort of. This is dealing with maybe gifting. Is that what? The kiddie?
No, the kiddie tax was something that we call rate arbitrage, and what that is trying to take advantage of somebody who has a lower rate being taxed or not taxed at all. And the kiddie tax was enacted in response to that, where they said, okay, if your child has unearned income, which is in short term something they didn't work for, so if they're getting dividends, interest, that kind of passive income, then there was going to be a tax imposed on that. And it used to be that it was taxed by reference to the parent's tax bracket. Well, what's happened is they've taken that kind of movable bracket, depending on the situation away, and they are taxing that unearned income now at the same rates that they would tax a trust and estate, which is both good and bad, because perhaps people out there who were sitting at the highest tax bracket were saying, hooray, I didn't like the way it used to be. Well, you do hit that top tax bracket very quickly in trusts and estates, so it's not necessarily a huge hooray, but that is a change, and it is a simplification in that case, just applying the same scheme to everybody. The kiddie tax has been somewhat simplified.
But Michael,
Tom, you were right in that oftentimes it started with a gift.
Right.
Yes.
The parent would make a gift to the child, and then that gift would start earning income, and this is how you treat the income that's earned on what was given to the child.
Yes, so it starts with a gift and ends up like this.
Okay. What about everybody, of course, knows about charitable contributions, the money we give to the church, the money we give to the United Way. How were charitable contributions affected in all this?
Well, one of the other big changes that we've seen is that miscellaneous itemized deductions are suspended until 2026, and that's when this act sunsets. And what that means in the scheme of charitable contribution deductions is that they were in that group.
At the lower threshold.
Yes. And so you've seen the miscellaneous itemized deductions go away, and you've seen correspondingly also an increase to the standard deduction. So the standard deduction now is much higher, $12,000 for a single filer, $18,000 for head of household, $24,000 now for married filing jointly. Well, the way that it works is that you only itemize your deductions if your itemized deductions are more than the standard deduction. So since they've raised that standard deduction so much, very few people will be itemizing. Right. And charitable deduction is an itemized deduction. Right. So it hasn't gone away like those miscellaneous itemized deductions that I mentioned. However, for practical purposes, for a lot of people, it has gone away because they're not going to be itemizing with those higher standard deductions.
Right. Makes sense. So, okay. Michael, again, let's talk. You talked a little bit today about some of the agricultural issues and again, obviously our history here in St. Lucie County and the Treasure Coast, we were an agricultural based economy. Citrus has been our top product and for many years. I mean, what went on in all of this tax reform and changes with citrus and ag?
Well, Tom, there are a variety of provisions in the Tax Act that have a special provision or a different type of application when it comes to agricultural interest, and we tried to highlight those in our presentation there. today. But one of the things we talked about was a change that's designed to create an incentive for more investment in citrus and the replanting of citrus groves, and being able to replant those groves without having to capitalize the cost of bringing a tree into production and to the basis before you depreciate it. And I know that gets a little bit complicated, but in essence it allows the grower to deduct these expenses currently rather than waiting until the tree starts to produce and then start depreciating it at some later date. So what happened in the code section was they expanded the ability to bring in additional investors. So if a grower taxpayer had an event that caused them to lose their grove, a casualty, hurricane, disease like what we're dealing with greening, freeze, flood, or some other type of casualty, and lost their grove, they could bring in other investors so long under the old law they had to maintain more than a majority of the equity. And under the new change, they can maintain just 50% or half the equity and bring in other investors. And all of them, so long as the other investors are materially participating in the business, all of them can deduct the expenses of bringing those trees into production rather than have to capitalize them. But more importantly, there was a new provision added, but it's only good till 2027 when it sunsets, if I recall correctly.
That's right.
Which allows a new taxpayer, not the one that incurred the casualty, but a new taxpayer to buy a grove or a piece of property that used to have citrus on it. And if they replant that same piece of property, they too can qualify for this exception from having to capitalize the cost of bringing the trees into production. So it's a great incentive for folks that may want to get into the citrus industry or an existing citrus company to expand themselves by buying land that used to have citrus on it. And as long as they can show it had citrus, and it really doesn't have a look-back period. So these could be groves that were lost in the freezes of 81 and 83 for all we know. But as long as they can show it used to have citrus on it, they can replant that same piece of property and avoid these capitalization rules. The difficulty is that right now we still don't have the answer to greening, so it's hard for people to justify replanting trees only to watch them die a few years later. So we're in hopes that with some other changes, maybe some disease-resistant varieties, this will incentivize people to replant. Or there are varieties, you can replant other types of citrus as long as it's in the same family. So oranges could be replanted as grapefruit, but greening's bad on grapefruit, but oranges could also be replanted as lemons or limes. You'll see a lot of lemons planted in our area because that's become one of the varieties that seems more resistant to the greening and less susceptible. So you might see this encouraging some more plantings in our area, which is very important for us to maintain the critical mass we need for our citrus industry.
What's been the grower reaction so far to the new tax plan?
Well, it's just come out. We've been giving these presentations. I think the grower reaction would be much more favorable if we had an answer to greening, because who wants to spend the time to invest to plant a new grove, to watch it get 3 or 4 years old just to watch it die again. So that's been the biggest issue. And again, if we have some varieties that are disease resistant and people realize I don't have to plant the same variety, maybe this will incentivize them to do some other things.
And Michael, I know that you've been really dying to get into the idea of being able to replant in a different type altogether in response to some of the difficulties that have faced our industry, and that you think there's a good argument there.
One of the things that we've talked about is trying to approach the service to say, while we're having to deal with this greening, why don't we expand this definition, which we believe they could probably do in the regulations, and allow you to plant other types of perennial crops. So if I'm in citrus, which is a tree crop, and I wanted to plant, say, peaches or some other type of perennial crop, allow me to expand into that to keep the property in production, which is better for the environment and for the economy than to allow the land to go fallow. And that's what Dana's referring to, that there might be some opportunities in the future. And once citrus is ready to come back, then certainly let's incentivize people to replant the citrus. But in the meantime, let's put something else on the property that's productive.
Makes sense.
Might not be a bad idea to bring that to Washington in the fall.
That's true. and what Dana's lobbing up to me, I'm the incoming chair of the Florida Bar Tax Section.
Okay.
And our fall meeting is going to be in D.C. in September, and this is going to be one of the topics we're going to be talking about while we're up there.
All right. What about the aspect of depreciation? Were there any changes in tax code involving any accelerated depreciation? I know that was always a big issue with business people. Could you buy some equipment and accelerate the depreciation on it? And
Tom, you really ought to be back in the equipment business, because not only can you get bonus depreciation on the new equipment, but now your used equipment can get bonus depreciation.
Well, timing's everything.
And allow people to,
and I've never had good timing, so
allow people to write off the total cost in the year they acquire it. And actually, some of these new depreciation deductions go back to equipment that was bought as early as September of last year for some of the accelerated depreciation.
I think it's September 27th of last year, I believe, is the date.
So, well, I thought I had either read or heard something about depreciation in the new tax code.
There are multiple things. There's bonus depreciation, which allows you to write off the entire cost in the year of acquisition, and it's for new and used, and it's basically virtually all types of equipment. And then there are also the old Section 179 deduction, which allowed first-year expensing of things that you would have normally depreciated. But with the bonus depreciation, you don't need that. But as Dana's about ready to point out, there's a phase out of the bonus, and so as it phases out, these other provisions would become more involved, because they'll allow you to take greater deductions.
Well, and before you answer the question, obviously this could be big in an area like ours, because we have agriculture, which requires equipment, but we also have a number of manufacturers. Does it include manufacturing equipment?
Absolutely. That is, as we said, another big winner of the Tax Act is manufacturing, because it allows for significant deductions on the equipment, and it allows the owners, when they pass through the income, significant deductions based on the new 199A deduction, which we don't have near enough time to cover 199A today. As you saw, it took better than half of the presentation today to just give a superficial discussion about the new 199A deduction for
give us your quick overview on that, Dana.
On 199A, I think I will leave it with the simple synopsis of a 20% deduction for pass-through income, subject to a lot of rules.
Correct.
Okay. But still, at the end of the day, like you're saying, the big winners are manufacturing.
Right. You've got, again, number one winner is multinational corporations. They got the big brass ring out of this. Number two winner is going to be decedents of people who pass away between now and 2026. So if your children want to take you skydiving between now and 2026, think twice about what it is they're trying to do.
Right.
And then you also have states that have low taxes, like the state of Florida, is a big winner, because it makes us compare so favorably with the states that have high taxes, now that those state taxes are limited in how much they can deduct. So it makes Florida very attractive.
We could become a soft landing location for a lot of companies moving here.
Absolutely. They're all looking. In fact, you're seeing some states that have high taxes starting to advertise here, trying to attract people back, because they're scared to death of them all moving to places like Florida.
Right.
And then the last one I mentioned earlier today was manufacturing. Manufacturing is a significant winner in all this, because of all of the deductions on their equipment and other items, and then the ability to pass that through if they're a pass-through entity, like Dana was mentioning, which is S corporations, limited liability companies, partnerships, sole proprietorships.
So passing through that income and those benefits to the owner.
Correct, to the owners, the shareholders, the partners, and then they're able to take a deduction off of their profits, in essence, to be able to under that 199A. So it's, like you said, it's a treasure map, and there are lots of buried treasure in there. You just got to know how to work your way through the formula to get there.
Well, and again, we are so involved in in manufacturing, and we've got some courses that support the manufacturing industry around the Treasure Coast, and so how do we get? I'm sure some of those manufacturers are your clients, and I'm sure all those manufacturers have accountants in the area, but I think that's just so important that we kind of get that word out, because our local manufacturers could be a real benefactor from this.
Oh, absolutely, and I think you're going to see a significant expansion of those fields in the near future. So
I think so. We've got a very robust community here on the Treasure Coast, and I've personally been privileged to be involved with the Treasure Coast Manufacturers Association, and I know they've also done a lot with IRSC as well in developing the courses and the need for training.
Correct. Yeah, it's a big part of what we're working with them now on our Fast Track to Manufacturing. We talk about it all the time. It's an incredible course and really designed to support their need for employees and recruitment. So,
but they'll be thrilled to know that they're big winners.
Well, I think it has. It's, the last couple of times we've talked about this, you presented also at the EDC lunch, I think, in the last 30 days, and I think it was well received when you talked about the manufacturing industry.
Absolutely. There are a lot of ears perked up when we said that's one of the big winners. And I think as they start to consult with their tax advisor, they're going to realize that. And remember, as we started, have you hugged your tax lawyer or your tax accountant recently? Because there's a lot of value in what's happened in this tax act change.
Well, again, as we kind of come to a close, I want to thank you guys again for what you did today. Great crowd today on main campus. A lot of people interested in what's going on, with the changes and the updates with the tax reform and the Jobs Act. So a great presentation today on your behalf.
Thank you. This was the third of 3 that we did across the state, over 300 in attendance when you collect all of them together. So it was very well done and well received, and we're proud to be part of it. Like I said, we've been helping the residents and the businesses of the Treasure Coast for over 30 years find their way through the tax code maze, and we'll be glad to continue to do that.
Well, if you need to get in touch with Michael or Dana, you can get them at deanmead.com. Or you can call them at 464-7700. I have dialed that number many times. And as we close, I want to just remind everybody we've got just as we did today with Dean Mead and bringing information to the business community about tax reform. We continue to try to bring value-added information to our business community. We've got a cyber security workshop and panel taking place on Tuesday, February the 27th. That's next Tuesday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Gonna partner with CW Technologies. Again, cyber attacks are a threat to all small businesses. If you are operating and owning a small business, you need to understand kind of this whole cybersecurity and cyber attack space. So, again, brought to you by the SBDC, partnering with CW Technologies. That is next Tuesday, February the 27th at 8 a.m. on the Pruitt campus. And you can register at that IRSCbiz.com site. So with that, we will bring to close another segment of Startup Talk coming to you from Indian River State College and the Florida Small Business Development Center. With that, we will talk to you next Thursday evening on Startup Talk.
You've been listening to Startup Talk right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie, WPSL.com, WPSL on Google Home, Alexa, and Echo worldwide, and WSTU, Stewart.